We've all heard terrifying stories about ghosts, hauntings, and paranormal occurrences. But we don't very often hear stories about paranormal intervention. I'm talking about instances where it seems that spirits have stepped in to prevent the inevitable from happening. Well, in this episode, we're going to cover just that. From people being saved from causing themselves harm, to would-be criminals being stopped in their tracks. The last story in particular is absolutely mind-blowing, so be sure to stick around for that one. Without further ado, grab a snack, dim the lights, and prepare for a feast of grim and grisly content. I'm your host, Severed Soul. This one night, I was boosting some silverware from this old lady's house. She was home, but old people are pretty deaf and damn slow, so I didn't give a shit. I heard this strange sound coming from the room where she was watching TV. The volume was way too loud. So I went to look, and she was like having a seizure or some shit. I might be a thief, but I'm not a jerk, so I called 911. You've broken into an old lady's house to steal her belongings. You're definitely a jerk. They answered the call and I'm thinking, shit, I don't know what to say. I couldn't exactly say, hi, I was just robbing this old lady's house and she's having a seizure. So, I froze up and said absolutely nothing. I waited with her, but she stopped seizing and then I heard the sirens, so I hid in her tiny front hall closet with the fold-up doors and shutters. Before the EMTs arrived, she stopped seizing, so by the time they got to her door, she seemed fine, except a bit confused as to why they were at her house in the first place. They made sure she was okay, apologised, and left. Literally within seconds of them leaving, she started seizing again, so I called 911 again just in case. As I said, I'm a thief, but I really don't want an old lady's death on my conscience. Same thing happened again. I heard the sirens, she stopped seizing and answered the door. Honestly, it's like a comedy at this point with me hiding in the closet, the bad guy with the heart of gold, but I'm not about to pop out and say, I swear to God she was having a seizure. So, again, they left. Just as they drove away, waving the old lady goodbye, I shit you not, she fell down and started seizing again. Now I know this is sad, but I had to see the funny side too. I had to call 911 again for Grandma, but this time I was thinking about leaving a note or something, just 'cause at this point, I did just want to get the fuck out of there. I called once more and waited for the sirens. Then, she stopped breathing and I started panicking. I'm thinking I need to get the fuck out of here quick. I hid as the EMTs came through the door. They put an oxygen mask on her and took her away. By this point, my adrenaline was through the roof, and fuck it all. I feel like I've earned the right to take as much stuff as I can walk out the door with, and since the house is now empty, I can take my time going through her stuff. Silverware, jewellery, cash in a shoebox. You name it. If I can find it, it's mine. A fee for being a good Samaritan, if you will. Again, you're robbing an old lady's house. You're definitely not a Samaritan. That's when I noticed one of the EMTs coming back to the house. Fuck knows why. I quickly hid again. He walked into the living room, turned the TV off, and grabbed a bag from the lady's chair. Now this is where the story gets scary. As the EMT turned to leave, an old man just appeared out of fucking nowhere. He patted the EMT on the back and whispered something into his ear. But the EMT didn't react at all. Didn't turn around. Didn't pause. He just headed back out the door like the old man wasn't even there. Then, the old guy literally glided to the front window and stood there waving goodbye. When I say glided, he moved across the floor without his legs moving at all. It was the creepiest shit I've ever seen. And then, he disappeared. Just like that, into thin air. I was standing in the closet, frozen, wondering what the hell had just happened. And that's when I felt it. Somebody was breathing down my neck.
Get out of my house.
I started running, praying, crying like a little bitch, right out the fucking front door. I didn't care who saw, I ran like hell. To this day, whenever someone says, scared straight, I try not to remember the sound of that old man's voice, but I always do. In 2014, I moved into a new flat. My partner at the time and my best friend were in my living room. I had been dyeing my hair, so I stood over the bath and bent over to wash my hair through. I looked through my legs and saw a man. Mid-length curly brown hair and a shortish, unkempt beard just standing in my hallway. I was rather freaked out. I shoved my hair up in a towel and briskly got back into the living room, pretending everything was normal. This experience really gave me the heebie-jeebies, so I slept with my bedroom door open so I could see the area he was stood for the next few nights. 3 nights later, I dreamt that he was stood there again, but this time he was joined by a little blonde-haired boy. The little boy kept running over to me at the side of my bed and shaking my arm trying to wake me up. He ran back to the man and told him he couldn't wake me. I remember him saying,
You must.
He ran back to me and started pulling at my arm again. I woke up and very quickly realised there was smoke in the air and a fire at the foot of my bed. My coat had been on a chair with the fur trim too close to the storage heater. I'm not a religious or spiritual believer, but this genuinely happened. I don't know how to explain it. I just know that I'm very grateful for the help I received. Before we move on to the next story, please do me a massive favour by smashing the like button and subscribing to the channel. My friends and I used to climb the rooftops of buildings a lot in our early to mid-teens. One of our favourite spots was the library by my house. It has a ladder on the back side with a gate blocking off the rungs, but you could grab the top of the gate and pull yourself up if you jumped high enough. We're all pretty tall, so this isn't too much of a challenge for any of us. We got to the top and were about to light our joints when we heard someone say,
You boys better get down right now.
We all jumped and turned around, but couldn't see anyone. I hesitantly looked around the AC units and electrical boxes, but still couldn't see anybody. I walked to the edge of the roof and looked down to the sidewalk below, but still couldn't see anybody. My friends and I scanned that entire rooftop, but didn't find a single person up there. It was a rooftop, so it's not like they could have had many places to hide in the first place. It startled us enough that we decided to leave and get high somewhere else. I still have no idea who or what told us to get off that roof. I grew up in a small town, and me and some of my friends made it our goal one summer to break into every building possible at night. Little shits, I know. We didn't want to steal anything, or actually break anything to get in. It was more of a test of our ability to pick locks or devise ways during the day that would make it easy to get in at night. We got into the elementary school one night. There was rumours of a bomb shelter in the basement, so we had to check it out. It was true. The basement janitor closet had a big-ass metal door, and inside there was some bomb shelter warning and an instructional guide, along with regular janitor equipment. Nothing interesting or crazy happened while we were inside the school, and we left after a short period of time. We hung out on the playground equipment afterwards, just messing around. At around 1 AM, while we were just hanging out, we all heard a banging sound coming from the 3rd floor window, and we all stopped talking and looked up. I couldn't see anything in the window, and then 3 incredibly loud slams against the window. We could see the window was shaking, but still nothing to be seen inside. We ran to the closest friend's house because it scared the absolute shit out of all of us. Over a couple of weeks one summer, me and some friends stuck into a nearby school at night. We didn't cause any damage or anything, we just fucked around. We ate candy out of desks, ate ice cream out of the school teacher's lounge, wrote notes to the teachers and hid them in the desks. The first night we went in, I was going to go into the library. I had the door open, but I very clearly heard one of my friends say,
"Don't go in there."
The problem is, my friend flatly denied saying anything. He was adamant it wasn't him who said it, so we didn't go in. After that night, the library doors were locked, so we couldn't go in even if we wanted to. Then one night, about 9 days later, our entrance, the rooftop hatch, was locked, and we couldn't get in anymore. The very next night some guys got busted after climbing in through the library windows. It seems they had motion detectors inside the library connected to a silent alarm. They aimed away from the door we would have entered through to gain access into the main area. We would definitely have been busted, if not for whoever, or whatever, had said those words. If you're enjoying this episode so far, please do me a massive favour by clicking on the like button and subscribing to the channel. Now, on to the next story. When I was 14, I'm 33 now, I used to boost cars for this car theft ring in California. I did it for several months and never got caught. It was more of a thrill and lack of direction from living in a bad area and lack of supervision and authority in my life. I had never been arrested or got caught. I was always a good kid, but I started to rebel after my parents split up. Anyway, there was one car that I needed to pick up and get delivered that day. Bossman was extremely insistent that the order needed to be filled within a few hours. It was just like any other job. But when I was about a mile away from the order, I got a very uneasy and disturbing feeling. Nothing was out of the ordinary or different from the dozens of other jobs I'd done, but I just couldn't shake this feeling. As I got closer to my destination, it was as if it just got noisier and more distracting. Something was telling me not to take this car. What happened next, I still can't explain to this day. I saw the car, and at first, I acted like I wasn't paying attention. But as I got closer, I noticed something. There was an old man sitting in the back of the car, and he was staring directly at me. As I made eye contact with him, I nearly hit a parked car, so I had to swerve. I took my eyes off that car for just a few seconds, but when I looked back, that man was gone. The car was completely empty. Obviously, I kept driving and knew I was in deep shit with the boss man. I decided to lay low because not filling an order was seriously bad news. That guy was not someone you wanted to cross or let down. You would feel the consequences. He was a menace and usually high on substances. So, I knew I had to lay low for a while. After 2 days of him blowing up my cell phone, the calls and messages suddenly stopped. I came to find out word on the street was that the cops pulled a big sting operation and that car I was supposed to steal was being monitored. My old boss sent some other kid to get the car and they followed the kid back to the scrapyard and did a big bust. The boss, that kid, and a whole boatload of other people got pinched, but nobody ever came for me. To this day, I really feel like someone was looking out for me at that moment, at that time, and I listened. Since that incident, I never pulled any shit like that again. I straightened up, got back into school, and graduated with honours. It was all because of that weird, supernatural moment. So, I used to work as a security guard at a large office building. I'm not proud to admit I often stole things like computers, desks, chairs, etc. from the offices. I was very careful and never took anything during my shift. There were only cameras in the lobby and on the outside of the building, not in any tenant spaces. One day, I found a wallet in a desk, and it had a few $100s in it. I took the money and left the wallet. I know for absolutely certain nobody saw me enter or leave the building, and I wasn't on any camera. A few weeks later, an old lady I'd never seen before in what looked like period clothing came up to the security desk and told me that she saw me take the money and even knew the exact amount. She said that she just wanted me to know that she knew. Then, without saying another word or waiting for my response, she turned around and walked to the back of the library, where I knew there was no exit. After a few seconds, I decided to follow the lady and give some lame excuse. However, she wasn't there. There was absolutely nowhere for her to go, but she had completely disappeared. There is just no possible way anyone could have seen me. Back in high school, a group of friends and I would break into recently built houses in our subdivision and use it for small gatherings and smoking before school. Anyway, one morning I was inside one of the houses smoking a joint before my bus arrived. I clearly heard someone that sounded like an older lady in one of the front rooms say,
"You need to leave this house right now."
I was pretty certain I was alone in the house, and it was maybe like 7:30 AM, so it was really early. Being the little rebel I was, and being legitimately confused as to who would be in the house so early, I went and checked every room. Of course, there wasn't anyone inside, and I never went back to that particular house. I've lived in the same subdivision for years, and multiple families have moved in just to move out months or even weeks later. Clearly, someone or something doesn't want anybody in that house. I used to grow a little weed and party on a plot of farmland in Wisconsin. We would have friends up every Memorial Day and would camp off the side of an off-road loop where we created a camp spot. Canoeing, partying, smoking and binge drinking. One night I took my '89 Chevy Blazer with a carload of people to the river for a swim. On the way back I was driving like an asshole on the trail, sending people bouncing all over, on purpose. I continued and carried around the loop, past the camp spot when someone from the back grabbed me, pulled me back into my driver's seat and yelled stop. I slammed on the brakes and everyone went flying forward. I threw it in reverse and made a 3-point turn to pull in and park at the camp spot. The passengers had had enough and didn't want to pass up the tents and the fresh beer. Everyone pulled out of the car, laughing. A few minutes went by, and my buddy, Mike, was yelling at something on the trail. I went over to see what he was looking at, and in the dirt passed out cold with mud on his face was one of our drunken friends. I immediately started freaking out and screaming how if Mike didn't see him and tell me to stop, and if I didn't pull in reverse after stopping, he would certainly be dead. I was yelling at him, pissed, until Mike stopped me to say, he didn't see shit. Nobody saw shit. Nobody grabbed me. But sure as hell, I swear on my children something grabbed me and yelled at me to stop, and saved his life that night. I don't consider myself a criminal. In fact, I pride myself in being a very ethical person. But one time I committed a minor crime that led me to think there may be some supernatural involvement here. I went to Hobby Lobby, a clearly Christian establishment, to buy some balsa wood. I only needed 4 or 5 pieces, but I saw a 6-pack, so I picked it up. When I went to the register, I realised that the cashier was charging me for only one piece. I guess it was not a 6-pack. It was probably the bulk packaging that came from the manufacturer, and the employees just never put them up. When I realised I was getting charged for one piece only out of the stack of 6, I decided to let it slide. I didn't point it out. I walked out with 6 pieces for the price of 1. Really, I stole 5 pieces. Fast forward a few days. I was using a table saw to cut grooves in the wood to make some small gift boxes. I was doing a pretty decent job, until I stopped to grab a drink. Then I noticed something pretty strange. The plug to my table saw had been removed from the socket. Now I know for a fact there was absolutely nobody else around at this point. Other than being a little bit freaked out, I decided to plug it back in and return to the table saw. The very first cut took some skin off the tips of 3 fingers. So off I went to the ER for emergency stitching and to get my tetanus shot, etc. I had to have surgery to reconstruct the fingertips, using cadaver skin. Shout out to whoever's fingerprints I now have. Thanks. Shortly after, the surgical wounds became infected with MRSA, which meant more hospitalisation and antibiotics. At this point, I was starting to feel God's wrath. Mind you, I'm not Christian. I was only very superficially Catholic long enough to get my first communion, and dropped the whole idea at bat. But, thinking about the chain of events that unfolded from 5 stolen pieces of balsa wood, I could not help to believe that this was a sign from a higher power. So, I went back to Hobby Lobby with one of the pieces of balsa wood. I asked to speak to the manager. I explained the situation to him and told him I wanted to pay for those other 5 pieces of balsa wood because I really needed to be done with it. I said it was a real load off my shoulders and I felt better after coming clean. He said it made him feel like a priest receiving confession. That was my first confession. It was not after a series of church classes, nor at the indicated age. But it did happen as a result of learning a lesson. So I guess that counts, even if I'm no longer Catholic. I remember a creepy story with a similar theme like this. A guy was talking about how he'd been squatting in a house that had recently been put on the market. He had a key to the house because he knew the previous owners, and he'd sleep and shower there after work. He talked about how one night while he slept, he heard knocking on one of the walls. He said it was rhythmic and came in patterns of 3. Knock, knock, knock. He couldn't figure out where it was coming from. He searched the whole house, and every time he entered the room the knocking was coming from, it would sound like it was coming from the opposite side of the house. Knock, knock, knock. Then he saw police cars pull up in the driveway. He hid while they scanned the windows and doors, and then booked it after they left. He later came back and said that the locks had been changed. He looked at the whole thing like the house was warning him he was about to be kicked out. Back in 2007, when I was 23, I moved in with this man that I'd known since I was a teenager. He had a younger sister that had recently died under some pretty tragic circumstances. He was very close to her and had a mural of sorts dedicated to her. It was a large bookcase with lit candles, pictures of her, poems she had written, a flask she always drank out of, and a large glass cross. Every morning he would ask me to come and take a shot of tequila with him in front of this shrine, in honour of Lucy, his sister. We would do that and then play her favourite song on the stereo. He told me that even though I never met his sister, as long as I was in his house, she would protect me and nothing bad would happen to me. I thought that was a very sweet sentiment, but didn't really think much more of it. Well, one night while my friend was at work and I was doing the dishes, my phone rang. My heart sank when the name came up on the screen. It was an ex-boyfriend of mine, who was a very violent man, and he was trying to get back into my life. He was also an acquaintance of the guy I was living with, and had been to the house many times before I lived there. He said that he was in the neighbourhood, and he really wanted to see me. I said I didn't want to let anyone in the house while my friend wasn't there, and to wait until he came home from work at about 7 o'clock in the morning. Very stupid. Now he knew how long I would be alone. I locked all of the doors. I went towards my roommate's door to go and lock his bedroom windows, but just as I reached for the doorknob, it turned. My ex-boyfriend came out of the room. He had crawled in from an open window. He chased me into the living room and pushed me onto the couch, which was right by the shrine of my roommate's sister. He pulled out a large hunting knife and told me not to make any noise. I started to cry and begged him not to hurt me. He told me to shut up and not to piss him off. As he was on top of me, I couldn't help but notice that the bookcase with Lucy's shrine all of a sudden started shaking violently, and no, it was not an earthquake. It was shaking so much I thought it was going to fall over, but then all of a sudden, one by one, all of the candles in the shrine started blowing out. Then the glass cross flew, not fell, off the top shelf and hit him on the back of the head. He turned around and looked at the shrine, obviously very confused. Without warning, the stereo turned itself on and was blasting so loud I had to cover my ears. He got up and ran out of the house, and hasn't bothered me since. I couldn't believe it. I know Lucy saved my life that night. Shortly after that, I moved back in with my parents. The graveyard where Lucy is buried is down the street from where I live now. I'll visit every so often to say hi, and to thank her for saving my life. Well, that's all for today. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, then please do me a huge favour by clicking on the like button and subscribing to the channel for a feast of grim and grisly content. Please also leave any thoughts on today's stories in the comments section. I always try my very best to respond to any comments. As always, thanks for watching. I'm your host,
Severed Soul.